Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The polished wood floors of the law office gleamed under the lights as Christian strode purposefully down the hallway, his impeccably tailored suit a testament to his professional success. At 35, he had climbed the corporate ladder with remarkable speed, earning a reputation as one of the firm's most ruthless litigators. His colleagues respected him, his clients trusted him, and his adversaries feared him. But beneath the crisp white shirt and power tie beat the heart of a man with a secret that, if revealed, could shatter the carefully constructed facade he had built over years of relentless ambition and sacrifice. As he reached his corner office, Christian closed the door behind him and allowed his shoulders to slump ever so slightly. He loosened his tie and sank into the plush leather chair behind his mahogany desk. For a moment, he let his eyes drift to the bottom drawer, locked, always locked, where he kept a small makeup bag and a few carefully chosen accessories. The urge to open that drawer, to let Lila out, was almost overwhelming. But he resisted, as he always did during work hours. There was too much at stake, too many eyes watching, too many expectations to meet. A sharp knock at the door made him sit up straight, composure snapping back into place like a rubber band. "Come in!" he called, voice steady and authoritative. His assistant, Megan, poked her head in. "Mr. Reeves wants to see you about the Hernandez case. He's free now if you have a moment." Christian nodded, already rising from his chair. "Thank you, Megan. I'll head over right away." As he made his way to the senior partner's office, Christian pushed all thoughts of Lila to the back of his mind. He was Christian now, confident, competent, and utterly masculine. The mask he wore every day at work was as much a costume as the dresses and wigs he donned in private, but it was one he had perfected over years of practice. The meeting with Mr. Reeves was brief but productive. They discussed strategy for an upcoming deposition, and Christian left feeling energized by the intellectual challenge. This was why he had become a lawyer, the thrill of the mental sparring, the satisfaction of outsmarting an opponent. As the workday drew to a close, Christian found himself alone in his office once more. He loosened his tie again and allowed himself a small sigh of relief. The weekend stretched before him, 2 precious days of freedom from the constant performance of masculinity. He gathered his things, including the locked drawer's contents discreetly transferred to his briefcase, and bid goodnight to the few colleagues still burning the midnight oil. The elevator ride to the parking garage was mercifully solitary, allowing him a moment to let his guard down. In his car, Christian felt the familiar mix of anticipation and anxiety begin to build. Tonight was the night. After months of internal debate and careful planning, he had decided to take Lila out in public for the first time. The drive home was a blur of nervous energy. As soon as he entered his apartment, Christian beelined for the bedroom, shedding his suit like a snake molting its skin. He stood before the full-length mirror, studying his reflection critically. At 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a strong jaw, Christian knew he would never pass as a cisgender woman. But that wasn't the point. Lila wasn't about fooling anyone. She was about finally allowing a part of himself to breathe, to exist in the world beyond the confines of his apartment. He began his transformation with practiced efficiency, foundation to smooth his skin, contouring to soften the angles of his face, false lashes to frame his dark eyes, a swipe of bold red lipstick as a finishing touch. The wig, a shoulder-length style in a rich chestnut brown, was secured carefully in place. Next came the clothes. He had agonized over this outfit for weeks, wanting something that struck the right balance between feminine and age-appropriate. He settled on a knee-length wrap dress in a deep emerald green, cinched at the waist to create the illusion of curves. Black opaque tights and low heels completed the look. Standing before the mirror once more, Christian barely recognized himself. Lila stared back at him, eyes bright with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves.
"You can do this,"
he whispered to his reflection.
"You deserve to be seen."
With trembling hands, he grabbed his purse, a small black clutch containing only the essentials, and headed for the door. The hallway of his apartment building was mercifully empty as he made his way to the elevator. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the entire building must hear it. The cool night air hit him as he stepped outside, and for a moment he considered turning back, but the part of him that had been silenced for so long refused to retreat now. Lila lifted her chin and began to walk. His destination was a small cafe about 10 blocks away. He had chosen it carefully, far enough from his usual haunts that he was unlikely to run into anyone he knew, but close enough that he could quickly retreat home if needed. The first block was terrifying. Every passing car felt like a spotlight, every pedestrian a potential judge. But as he continued to walk, putting one foot in front of the other, a strange calm began to settle over him. The world didn't stop turning. No one pointed or laughed. He was just another person on the street, going about their evening. By the time he reached the cafe, Christian felt almost giddy with relief and a newfound sense of freedom. He ordered a latte, his voice pitched slightly higher than usual but steady. The barista smiled at him, just as she would any other customer. Finding a small table by the window, Lila, sat and sipped her coffee, savoring the moment. She watched the world go by outside, marveling at how different everything looked from this perspective. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt truly present in her own skin. As the evening wore on and the initial adrenaline began to fade, Lila found herself people-watching with increasing interest. She observed the easy way women interacted with each other, the casual touches and shared laughter. There was a language here, a code of femininity that she had always observed from the outside, but never truly understood. A group of women around her age entered the cafe, clearly friends out for a girls' night. Lila felt a pang of longing as she watched them chat and giggle together. She had male friends, of course, but those relationships always felt slightly performative, constrained by societal expectations of how men should interact. What would it be like, she wondered, to have female friends who knew and accepted all sides of her? Lost in thought, Lila didn't immediately notice when one of the women approached her table. It wasn't until a gentle voice said, "Excuse me," that she looked up, startled. The woman smiled warmly. "I hope this isn't too forward, but I just had to tell you how much I love your dress. That color is gorgeous on you." For a moment, Lila froze, her mind racing. Was she being clocked? Was this some kind of trap? But the woman's expression remained open and friendly, no hint of judgment or mockery in her eyes. "Thank you," Lila managed to reply, her voice slightly shaky. "That's very kind of you to say." "I'm Olivia," the woman said, extending her hand. "My friends and I are celebrating a birthday. Would you like to join us? We always say the more, the merrier." Lila hesitated, torn between the desire for connection and the fear of exposure. But something in Olivia's warm smile and the genuine invitation in her eyes made the decision for her. "I'd love to," she heard herself say. "I'm Lila." And just like that, Lila found herself swept into the group, accepted without question. The women, Olivia, Rachel, Tessa, and the birthday girl, Mia, were all in their early 30s, working professionals who had bonded over shared experiences navigating male-dominated industries. As the night progressed, Lila found herself relaxing, even contributing to the conversation. She spoke about her own experiences in the corporate world, carefully editing details to protect her identity, but sharing the emotional truth of her struggles. "God, I know exactly what you mean," Tessa exclaimed after Lila described a particularly frustrating interaction with a condescending male colleague. "It's like they can't fathom that we might actually know what we're talking about." The others nodded in agreement, and Lila felt a rush of belonging unlike anything she had experienced before. These women understood her in a way that went beyond gender. They saw her as a person, with valid experiences and opinions. As the night drew to a close, phone numbers were exchanged, and promises to meet up again were made. Lila found herself both exhilarated and terrified by the prospect. She had taken a huge step tonight, but maintaining these friendships would require a level of openness and vulnerability she wasn't sure she was ready for. Walking home, Lila's mind raced with the events of the evening. She had done it. She had gone out in public as her true self and not only survived, but thrived. The world hadn't ended. She hadn't been ridiculed or attacked. Instead, she had been accepted, even embraced. But as she entered her apartment and began the process of removing her makeup and wig, doubt began to creep in. Could she really build a life as Lila? What would happen if her colleagues found out? Would she lose everything she had worked so hard to achieve? The next morning, Christian woke with a mixture of emotions swirling in his chest. The memory of the previous night felt almost dreamlike, too good to be true. He went about his weekend routine, gym, groceries, case prep for Monday, but his mind kept drifting back to the cafe, to the easy camaraderie he had experienced as Lila. As Sunday evening approached, bringing with it the looming specter of another work week, Christian found himself standing before his closet, staring at the stark divide between his masculine and feminine wardrobes. The suits and ties that had once felt like armor now seemed constrictive, suffocating. He reached out, running his fingers over the soft fabric of Lila's dresses. There was one in particular, a midnight blue cocktail dress with a subtle shimmer that he had purchased on a whim but never worn. It had seemed too fancy, too risky for a quiet night in alone. Suddenly, an idea began to form in Christian's mind. He remembered seeing a flyer in the office break room for an upcoming charity masquerade ball. He had dismissed it at the time, not being one for social events, but now, the ball was in 2 weeks. It was a perfect opportunity, a chance for Lila to attend a high-class event, to truly shine in a way she never had before. The masks would provide an extra layer of anonymity, allowing him to relax and enjoy himself without fear of recognition. Before he could talk himself out of it, Christian was online, purchasing a ticket to the ball. His heart raced as he clicked confirm, a mixture of excitement and terror coursing through his veins. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. By day, Christian threw himself into his work with even more vigor than usual, as if to compensate for the double life he was planning. By night, he meticulously planned every detail of Lila's debut. The dress was altered to fit perfectly, accentuating the curves created by carefully placed padding. He invested in a high-quality wig, styled into an elegant updo. Hours were spent practicing makeup techniques, perfecting the art of contouring to soften his jawline and enhance his cheekbones. Finally, the night of the ball arrived. Christian took a deep breath as he began his transformation. Each step of the process felt like shedding a layer of the persona he presented to the world, revealing the truth that lay beneath. As he secured the ornate mask, a delicate creation of silver filigree and midnight blue feathers that matched his dress perfectly, Christian felt a sense of calm settle over him. Tonight, he wasn't Christian the cutthroat lawyer or Lila the secret alter ego. Tonight, he was simply himself, free to be whoever he wanted to be. The venue for the ball was a grand old hotel, its ballroom transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and music. As Lila stepped out of her taxi, she felt a moment of vertigo, as if she had stepped into another world entirely. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of masks and finery. Men in tuxedos and women in flowing gowns moved about the room, their faces obscured, but their body language speaking volumes. Lila took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and sipped it slowly, allowing herself to acclimate to the surroundings. As she made her way deeper into the crowd, Lila found herself relaxing. The anonymity of the masks seemed to have loosened everyone's inhibitions. Conversations flowed freely, laughter rang out, and the dance floor was packed with couples swaying to the music. Lila was just considering joining the dancers when a voice behind her made her freeze. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice you standing here alone. Would you care to dance?" She turned slowly, her heart pounding. She knew that voice, even muffled slightly by his mask, a simple black domino that did little to disguise his features. There was no mistaking the man before her. It was Mr. Reeves, her boss. For a moment, Lila considered fleeing, but something, perhaps the champagne, perhaps the magic of the night, made her pause. Mr. Reeves didn't recognize her. How could he? Christian and Lila were two entirely different people. "I'd be delighted," she heard herself say, placing her hand in his outstretched one. As they moved on to the dance floor, Lila felt a curious mix of terror and exhilaration. Here she was, dancing with the man who held her career in his hands, and he had no idea. It was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. Mr. Reeves proved to be an excellent dancer, leading her smoothly through the steps of a waltz. As they moved together, he began to speak.
"I have to confess,"
he said, his voice low and conspiratorial.
"I'm not usually one for these sorts of events. But there's something about the masks, isn't there? The freedom to be someone else, just for a night."
Lila nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Mr. Reeves continued, seemingly encouraged by her silence.
"In my line of work, we wear masks every day. We present a certain face to our clients, our colleagues, the world at large. But sometimes I wonder,
what would happen if we all just let those masks slip? If we showed our true selves, vulnerabilities, and all?" As he spoke, Lila felt something shift inside her. She had always seen Mr. Reeves as the epitome of masculine corporate success, confident, unflappable, perhaps even a bit intimidating. But here, in this moment, she glimpsed a different side of him, a side that perhaps understood more than she had ever given him credit for. "Perhaps," Lila said carefully, finding her voice at last. "The masks we wear aren't just to hide our true selves. Maybe they're a part of us too, different facets of who we are. Mr. Reeves looked at her with newfound interest.
That's an intriguing perspective. Do you feel that way about your own mask?
The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that Mr. Reeves couldn't possibly understand. Lila took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a precipice.
My mask, she said slowly, is both a shield and a window. It protects me, yes, but it also allows me to express parts of myself that I can't in my day-to-day life.
Mr. Reeves nodded thoughtfully.
I can understand that. We all have aspects of ourselves that we feel we need to keep hidden. But I've found that the older I get, the more I value authenticity, both in myself and in others.
As the dance came to an end, Mr. Reeves stepped back and gave a small bow.
Thank you for the dance, and for the conversation. It's been illuminating.
Lila curtsied in return, her mind whirling. As Mr. Reeves disappeared back into the crowd, she made her way to a quiet corner of the ballroom, needing a moment to process what had just happened. She had danced with her boss, had a meaningful conversation about identity and authenticity, and he had no idea who she really was. It was surreal, like something out of a dream. But more than that, Mr. Reeves's words had struck a chord deep within her. Authenticity. Wasn't that what she had been searching for all along? The freedom to be her true self, to integrate all the different aspects of her identity into one whole person? As the night wore on, Lila found herself engaging with more people, each interaction boosting her confidence. She danced, she laughed, she debated current events with a group of intellectuals gathered near the bar. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and appreciated for who she was. Not as Christian the lawyer or Lila the secret crossdresser, but as a complete person with thoughts, feelings, and experiences to share. As the ball began to wind down, Lila made her way out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air was a relief after the warmth of the ballroom, and she took a moment to simply breathe, savoring the last moments of this magical night. Quite a view, isn't it? Lila turned to see Mr. Reeves standing nearby, his mask now removed. She tensed for a moment, but his eyes showed no sign of recognition.
It's beautiful, she agreed, her voice soft.
Mr. Reeves moved to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the twinkling city lights.
You know,
he said after a moment,
our conversation earlier got me thinking. About authenticity, about the masks we wear.
He turned to look at her, his expression serious.
In my position, I see a lot of people trying to be something they're not. Trying to fit into a mold they think will bring them success. But the truly successful people, the ones who really make a difference, they're the ones who are true to themselves, who bring their whole selves to the table.
Lila felt her heart begin to race. Was this going somewhere? Did he suspect? Mr. Reeves continued, seemingly oblivious to her inner turmoil.
I've been thinking about implementing some changes at the firm, creating a more inclusive environment, one where people feel safe to be their authentic selves. What do you think? Is that something that would make a difference in a workplace?
The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Lila took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a great change. I think, she said slowly, carefully choosing her words, that would make an enormous difference. When people feel accepted and valued for who they truly are, they're able to bring their best selves to work. They're more creative, more productive,
more invested in the success of the company. Mr. Reeves nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you for your insight. It's been a pleasure talking with you tonight.
With a final nod, he turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving Lila alone with her thoughts. As she made her way home that night, Lila's mind was a whirlwind of emotions and ideas. The conversation with Mr. Reeves had sparked something in her, a glimmer of hope for a future where she didn't have to choose between her career and her true self. The next morning, as Christian dressed for work, he found himself looking at his reflection with new eyes. The suit and tie no longer felt like a costume, but rather another facet of his complex identity. He was Christian, yes, but he was also Lila. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to honor both sides of himself. As he walked into the office, Christian felt a new sense of purpose. He wouldn't reveal everything all at once. That would be too much, too fast. But he could start small. He could advocate for those diversity and inclusion initiatives Mr. Reeves had mentioned. He could be a voice for authenticity and acceptance in the workplace. And maybe, just maybe, one day he would find the courage to let the world see all of who he was. Not just Christian, not just Lila, but the beautiful, complex person who existed in the space between. As he settled into his desk, Christian allowed himself a small smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was also full of hope. He opened his laptop and began to type, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with newfound strength and authenticity. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Christian knew that each step, no matter how small, was a step towards a more authentic, integrated life. And that, he realized, was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of doubt. As the day progressed, Christian found himself paying closer attention to his colleagues, noticing the small ways in which they, too, might be hiding parts of themselves. He overheard snippets of conversation about weekend plans, carefully edited, family photos conspicuously absent from desks, pronouns stumbled over in casual conversation. During the weekly team meeting, when Mr. Reeves opened the floor for general discussion, Christian surprised himself by raising his hand. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach, "about ways we could make our workplace more inclusive. I've read some interesting studies about the positive impact of diversity initiatives on company culture and productivity. Would it be possible to form a committee to explore some options?" The room fell silent for a moment, and Christian felt a bead of sweat form on his brow. But then Mr. Reeves smiled, a warm, approving expression that made Christian's tension ease slightly.
"That's an excellent suggestion, Christian,"
Mr. Reeves said.
"In fact, I've been considering something similar myself. Why don't you take point on this? Put together a proposal, and we'll discuss it further next week."
As the meeting adjourned, Christian found himself surrounded by colleagues expressing interest in his idea. Some shared personal stories of feeling out of place in the corporate world. Others offered resources and contacts who might be helpful. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. Over the next few weeks, Christian threw himself into researching diversity and inclusion best practices. He reached out to consultants, read countless articles, and even attended a conference on creating LGBTQ+ friendly workplaces. Each new piece of information felt like a step towards a future where he could be his whole self, not just at home or at masquerade balls, but every day. As he worked on his proposal, Christian found the lines between his two selves beginning to blur in small, subtle ways. He started wearing colorful socks with his suits,
a tiny rebellion against the monochrome uniform of corporate law. He let his nails grow a bit longer, keeping them meticulously manicured. Small changes, barely noticeable to others, but each one felt like a victory. The day finally came for Christian to present his proposal to the partners. As he stood before them, PowerPoint slides filled with data and recommendations, he felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't just about creating a more inclusive workplace for others. It was about creating a space where he, too, could thrive. The benefits of a diverse and inclusive workplace are clear, he concluded, gesturing to a graph showing increased productivity and employee satisfaction. By implementing these initiatives, we're not just doing the right thing morally, we're making a smart business decision. As he finished speaking, Christian held his breath, watching the partners' faces for any sign of their thoughts. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then, Mr. Reeves leaned forward, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Christian," he said, "this is impressive work. You've clearly put a lot of thought and effort into this proposal. I think we'd be foolish not to move forward with at least some of these recommendations." The other partners nodded in agreement, and Christian felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't everything. Not yet, but it was a start. As the meeting adjourned and Christian gathered his materials, Mr. Reeves approached him.
"I have to say, Christian,"
he said, his voice low and confidential,
"I'm impressed by your passion for this project. It's not often we see associates taking this kind of initiative, especially on issues that don't directly relate to casework."
Christian nodded, unsure how to respond. Mr. Reeves continued,
"I hope you know that this firm values you not just for your legal skills, but for your whole self. The perspective you bring, the way you think outside the box, that's invaluable."
For a moment, Christian felt as though he might cry. He blinked rapidly, forcing the emotion back.
"Thank you, sir,"
he managed to say.
"That means a lot to me."
As he walked back to his office, Christian felt as though something fundamental had shifted. The world hadn't changed overnight, but a door had opened. A possibility had presented itself. That evening, as he stood in front of his closet, Christian made a decision. He reached past his usual array of suits and pulled out a silk blouse in a soft lavender shade. It was feminine without being overtly so, something that could pass as a fashion-forward choice for a man, but that felt true to his inner self. The next morning, as he dressed for work, Christian paired the blouse with a charcoal gray suit. He styled his hair with a bit more care than usual, allowing a softer, slightly tousled look. Looking in the mirror, he saw neither Christian nor Lila, but a person who was uniquely, authentically, himself. As he walked into the office, Christian braced himself for comments or stares. But aside from a few appreciative glances at his outfit, no one seemed to react. He overheard one of the paralegals whispering to another, "Christian's really stepped up his fashion game lately, hasn't he?" Throughout the day, Christian felt a new sense of ease in his own skin. He spoke up more in meetings, let his natural wit and charm shine through in client interactions. It was as if by allowing this small expression of his true self, he had unlocked a well of confidence he didn't know he possessed. As weeks passed, Christian continued to push the boundaries of his self-expression at work. Subtle makeup one day, a delicate necklace the next. Each small step felt like a victory, a reclaiming of his authentic self. The diversity initiatives he had proposed began to take shape. The firm hosted workshops on unconscious bias, updated its non-discrimination policies, and even started an LGBTQ+ employee resource group. Christian found himself at the center of these changes, respected and valued for his contributions. It was at one of these workshops that Christian finally found the courage to take the biggest step of all. As the facilitator opened the floor for personal stories, Christian felt his heart begin to race. Before he could talk himself out of it, he raised his hand.
"I'd like to share something,"
he said, his voice shaky but determined.
"For years, I've been hiding a part of myself out of fear. I'm gender nonconforming, and I've struggled to reconcile that with my professional identity."
The room fell silent, all eyes on Christian. He took a deep breath and continued.
"But working on these initiatives, seeing the commitment this firm has made to inclusivity, has given me hope. Hope that I can be my authentic self and still be valued for my skills and contributions."
As he finished speaking, Christian braced himself for the response. For a moment, the silence stretched on, feeling interminable. Then, slowly, people began to applaud. Colleagues he had known for years approached him with words of support and appreciation for his bravery. Mr. Reeves made his way through the crowd, his expression unreadable. Christian felt his heart skip a beat as his boss approached.
"Christian,"
Mr. Reeves said, his voice low but firm.
"Thank you for sharing that with us.
Your courage is exactly why these initiatives are so important."
He placed a hand on Christian's shoulder, a gesture of support that spoke volumes.
"You have my full support, and the support of this firm. Be yourself. That's the person we hired, after all."
In that moment, Christian felt as though a weight he had been carrying for years suddenly lifted. He wasn't naive enough to think that everything would be perfect from that point on. There would still be challenges, still be people who didn't understand, but he had taken the first, crucial step towards living as his authentic self. As he left the office that evening, Christian felt a sense of possibility he hadn't experienced in years. He thought about Lila, about the joy he felt when he allowed that part of himself to exist in the world. For the first time, he could imagine a future where Lila wasn't a secret to be hidden, but a cherished part of his whole self. He pulled out his phone and opened his contacts, scrolling to the numbers he had gotten from Olivia and the other women at the cafe. He hadn't reached out to them yet, too afraid of the complications it might bring. But now, with this new sense of freedom, he felt ready to explore those connections.
"Hi, Olivia," he typed. "It's Lila from the cafe. I was wondering if you'd like to get together sometime. I have quite a story to share."
As he hit send, Christian felt a smile spread across his face. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of potential. He was ready to embrace it, to embrace himself, in all his beautiful complexity. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, Christian felt truly equipped to face it. He was no longer hiding, no longer divided. He was simply himself, Christian, Lila, and all the shades in between. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!